All right, I'm here with Kevin, and this is Kevin's roadmap to success. Let's show everybody how handsome you are, Kevin. Kevin is a little white dog rescue dog, one of our favorite rescues here in Omaha. And basically in this video, I'm gonna just kind of summarize what we covered in the session. These are the tricky trainers. I'm gonna leave this bag here. Make sure you zip all the air out of this every time you close it. Now Kevin, I actually stepped on his paw when we were just wrapping up in the kitchen. And he kind of was leaning and staying away from me. And the guardians mentioned that this is kind of some of the behavior that he demonstrates to one of the in-laws. So basically, dogs are kind of the ultimate hard to get. If you're trying to fawn all over the dog and trying to engage with them, some dogs will be like, oh, what's wrong with you? Why are you so engaging with me? So he'd be a better dog that for those in-laws, I would rather that they just play hard to get. I recommend that this is a mini treat pouch from a company called Pet Safe. This is the mini. You can get this on Amazon. You can actually fill it up with treats. It stays open. It's got a clip. This is a hand sanitizer. But basically, you could just have it clipped to your belt. So when dad comes over, whoever the guest is, we want to load it up with probably the tricky trainers. And I would probably take a knife and cut the tricky trainers in half. And so you have them ready to go. But cut them right before the person comes over. Then give this to dad. Now I'm going to go through kind of a protocol for the in-laws or anybody that he reacts to set him up for to make it a positive experience. And we can use the engage-disengage game above. But we also want to set him up for success. If we have a visitor come over and Jay, the little one, is got an ear infection, he's crying and wailing like crazy, and the guardians maybe got into an argument or something like that, that's not a great time to practice these sort of things because dogs are very perceptive. And Kevin's going to pick up and, they're annoyed, the baby's crying, I'm a little bit anxious, and we're just putting him in a bad situation. We want to put the dog in good, positive situations to succeed. Now, when I meet people, meet a dog that is maybe reactive or fearful or aloof of other dogs, what I do is I set them up for success by first exercising them first, give them about 10 minutes to recover, and find that Goldilocks. Don't exercise too much, don't exercise too little. And then basically, so you exercise him with fetch or whatever it is, he gets 10 minutes to rest, and then what I would do is I would have him go outside and find a treat trail. Now, to set this up, I would have you practice this without somebody there. So what you do is right outside the door, you put a treat, then put another one, and make it a pretty straight line so the dog can see. And at first, the treats are maybe every foot. Then after we get down maybe a couple feet away from the house, they go to 2 feet, then 3 feet. But it should be a straight line on the sidewalk, and the dog can identify that pattern. And then the idea is go to the end of the street or down the sidewalk or whatever it is, go to the street, and then take a right or left. And the dog is following these treats. And at this point, when you get to the street, maybe they're one every 3 feet or so. And then you want to go around the right or left so that when the dog comes out to the house, I don't want them to be able to see the person. So at first what you do is you leave the trail of treats to wherever the person is going to be, but at first there's nobody there. So Kevin just gets practice coming out. I come out and there's a trail of treats. Oh man, this is one of those great days where there's just a whole bunch of really good high value treats. And I'd probably use the Charlie Bears and CHRLEE Bears, on Amazon. So he finds those. And then when he gets to where the person eventually is going to be, there's a small pile. But where the person is positioned should be a place where he cannot see from the inside of his house. So we want the dog to get a belly full of treats before they can see the person. And right when the person's going to be coming to a view, if like it's going around a car, right before we get to the end of the car, I have a small little pile of treats. So the dog gobbles them up and then they come around the corner, they've got a whole bunch of treats in their mouth. And then I would have the guest, whoever the person is, sitting sideways. So Kevin is approaching sideways. Front facing is confrontational, standing up is authoritative. So if the person is sitting like in the street, facing away, and Kevin leads up and the tree trail comes all the way to the person, maybe there's a small pile here, well, Kevin's in a pretty good mood by the time he gets to that person. Then the person basically has the treats in the treat pouch. They come over and they just kind of hold the treat out. And when you're holding the treat out, hold the treat out to your side, not in front of you. And if he won't take it, just put it on the ground. If he starts barking, the person could throw the treat behind Kevin, and or the guardian could call Kevin away, ask him for sits or down or whatever it is, and then try to approach again. Once you get to the point where Kevin's coming up and Kevin's sniffing the person should hold still. They should not try to pet him. They should not say good boy or baby talk or any of that stuff. We're going to be completely passive and let Kevin interact with us. We have the good treats, and when he does, I can hold the treat out and give him one, but I'm not asking him to do anything. So after Kevin gets comfortable enough, then what I would do is I'd pull out a couple of treats. Let's say Kevin's right here. I'd show him that I have the treats, and then I would, come here, buddy, let's demonstrate. So then I would throw the treats there. Kevin walks away, and then the person can stand up. When you stand up, you become more authoritative, so he might bark at that point. So we would like the dog to move away as the person, and hopefully be turned away as the person stands up. And the person standing there, and I'm not going to do it, so I'm not out of the shot, but I would be standing facing this direction. So when Kevin comes back to me, I am sideways still. Then we're going to go ahead and walk, and I would walk probably to the end of the block and then come back. Now, on the walk, we're going to let him sniff as much as he wants to. Remember, sniffing burns more energy than walking. And if you can, halfway through the walk, it'd be nice if you could hand the leash to your guest. So now the guest is the one that is kind of in control, so to speak. Now, if Kevin is pulling on the leash or lunging, that's not the good time. The only way I would hand the leash if the dog's nice and relaxed and comfortable. And again, the guest is going to have the treat pouch. So now, and the guest, as you're taking the walk, every couple steps, should offer a couple treats just for no reason. All we want Kevin to do is practice approaching that person, getting a treat, and walking away. The person doesn't try to pet him or say anything to him other than yes. When he comes to them, yes, and give him a treat, and then he gets to walk away. After you've done that for maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 treats, when Kevin is nice and relaxed, he doesn't have his feet out behind him when he's approaching the person, that's when you would want to transition the leash, or transition to having the person, when Kevin comes up, hey, Kevin, come, and Kevin comes, holds the treat, Kevin comes up and gets the treat, yes, give him the treat, and then hold the second treat up and say, sit, Kevin sits, yes, and give him the treat, then you walk a couple paces, stop, sit, treat. So what we want to do is we want to build in some practice of Kevin listening to the person, and feeling and being rewarded for doing so. On a walk, there's a million escape routes, which makes dogs feel more comfortable. There's a lot of distraction because of all the smells. In the house, the dog is focused on one thing, their boogaboo only. And that's when you get a lot of the barking and reactivity. So it would be nice eventually when that guest comes over, the first couple times we go to the treat trail and then meet the guest and we go for a little walk. After a while, basically we have the guest text us when they get outside. We come out with Kevin on a leash, and then the guest takes Kevin for a little bit of a walk. So now we're building in a positive association with the guest or the person that Kevin is normally reactive to. And Kevin gets to establish his own relationship because he's apart from everybody else. I think part of Kevin's reactivity is that I think that he thinks that that's his job in the house, is to be protective of the house or the children, or the child or the adults or the whole enchilada. So I think that that's how he thinks he contributes to the house. And so I went over some things to help the guardians start to assume the mantle of responsibility, but to create a healthy leader-follower dynamic is what I'm trying to say. But before I get there, I want to talk a little bit about Jay and Kevin. So the dog nipped it at Jay one time, and since then the guardians have kept them completely separated. Well, the problem with that is that's the freshest memory the dog has. Anytime there's a negative experience, we want to obviously take the dog away and make sure everybody's safe and secure. Then we want to bring them back together as soon as we possibly can and go for a walk together or some sort of positive experience. So one of the things I'd like the guardians to do is, I talked about they have an X pen. I would like to have them get the X pen and get maybe plexiglass they put on maybe the bottom 2 feet of the X pen. So that way, when the baby is out and Kevin is in the X pen, which I'd probably put around your TV deal there, Kevin can actually, if the baby comes up, he can't stick his fingers through the deal and get nipped by Kevin. And so the idea is when he goes in there, we're going to make sure it's a positive experience. So we're going to pick and choose our battles. We're not going to put Kevin in there unless Kevin's had some exercise, is in a pretty relaxed mood. And we're not going to bring the baby out and practice this if the baby is really fussy. So this is when Jay is in a good mood and Kevin is in a good mood or been sufficiently exercised. I'd like the guardians to get at least 2 lick mats and smear the peanut butter on the lick mat. And so Kevin goes in there and gets the lick mat. Now, before we do this with the baby, we want to have Kevin practice just going over there. So when the baby's asleep and you're watching TV, set up your X pen, put the lick mat in there, put a bully stick or whatever in there, and watch TV. We want to have Kevin practice being in there without any negative and just feel like this is a great place to go. And also make sure you always have him go through the gate. Don't try to lift him over the X pen. Sometimes that causes them to try to climb their way out. So after doing this like 2 to 4 or 5 different nights or practice sessions where Kevin's in there, we want to keep on practicing this till Kevin goes in there and he just settles down with his bully stick or his kneecap or his lick mat or his Kong or whatever it is, and he's happy as a clam. Then we would actually bring the baby out and have the baby spend some time in here. Now, I prefer to have the baby not going straight towards him, at least initially. Eventually we can, but that's plexiglass helps the family feel comfortable and confident about that. But what we want the dog to do is be in the room with Kevin while the dog is having a good positive experience, and so that we're developing that positive experience between the two of them. Now, remember, dogs, when they chew or lick, they're releasing endorphins into their brain. It makes them feel good. So those are the things that I'd like you to get: lick mats, Kongs, bully sticks, and cow kneecaps tracheas, chicken feet, there are a whole bunch of stuff. Go to the green spot and ask what are some great stuff that we can get for our dog. And so every time he goes in there, he gets one of those things. So that's really important. So now, and you could actually put the baby, the X pen here and have the baby in the X pen as well and have Kevin outside if you feel comfortable with doing that. But the idea is we want them to spend time together. It'd be nice if we could actually take Kevin out on a walk with the stroller and Jay, which we haven't been able to do because it's cold weather, but now we're in the spring. So it gives you the ability, dogs process things by literally moving forward. So now the dog gets to go out with Kevin, or Kevin gets to go out with Jay, and they're doing something together, they're on a walk together. Okay, so let me see, what else? We also need to make sure that Kevin has a safe place to go to. Any room that Kevin is in, if there's baby gates up or whatever, there's gotta be somewhere in that room that Kevin can go to and the baby can't go to. Now, I drew a little diagram for the Guardians. What I've had a lot of people do is get like a kennel or just build a box and then put kind of like a little bit of a, it has like 3 right turns to get into it. The dog, it's really narrow, but the dog can navigate it and the baby can't. So what I would do is I would leave a trail of treats in there, and so the dog can kind of go in there, and when they get into it, there's a small pile of treats in the middle. And then ideally, maybe we set it up so we can see from the top. So basically the baby can't go over there, the baby can't get in there, and the dog can always go in there and hang out. But we want the dog to practice that without the baby. So that's why we leave the trail of treats. So maybe I first throw a treat towards the opening, and once the dog's in there, they look to the left in the first groove, and there's a treat there. So I go in and I get that one, and there's another treat there, and I get that one, and now I take a right turn, and then I go here, and then I get it. So I'm getting all these treats, and you're saying yes each time he goes a little bit further in. Eventually, then what we do is we would say Switzerland or Jamaica or whatever the word is, Vegas. Vegas maybe is for the dog bed, but come up with another word that means, maybe MGM, that means to go into that place. So now we can have the dog practice going in there a lot without the baby here. But then anytime we just want to proof it and just say, MGM, and then the dog goes in there and there's a treat at the end of the deal eventually. At first we leave the breadcrumbs trail of treats, and then the trail of treats is a little bit sparser, further apart. Eventually it's just one on the end of each corner, then one eventually just at the end. But we want to have a cue so we can tell the dog MGM and it goes into the safe, secure place. Eventually the dog with enough practice will figure this out. I can go in here if I don't want to deal with the baby and the baby can't get to me. The dog bed should also be a safe place. So if the dog is in the bed and you see Jay going towards me, you need to interrupt Jay. And that's why having the dog bed inside of the long-term confinement area would be helpful. But we just want the dog to always have a safe place it can go to so it doesn't have to activate the fight or out of the flight response. So instead of fighting, I flight and move away from the baby. That's another little exercise that you can do is just every time that the dog goes towards the baby, make a kissing sound. We call that a positive interrupter. Dog looks at you, throw a treat away. So the dog turns and walks away, and as I throw the treat, I would say away or distance or flee or whatever the word is you want to use. So, and then the dog comes back to Kevin, you throw it this way. So the idea is we're helping Kevin practice moving away, and we're saying the cue word before we throw the treat so that is an indicator. So eventually we could say away, and he runs away from Kevin, then we go over and give him a treat or throw a treat to him. At first we throw the treat to lure. Eventually we want to, and then we assign a cue when we know the dog can do it, and I'll talk about that in a sec. Then we want to be able to say the cue, the dog does the action, then we give them the treat after to pay them for the act. We went over marking and using cues or command words. I also gave the Guardians a clicker. Now I want them to prime or load the clicker or the command word, the cue word. The marker word. And so in order to do that, what I had the Guardians do is had about 10 treats and said yes and gave the dog a treat. And what I want them to do is, by the time they see it, probably should be done with this. But if you're marking, you want to just say the word. The dog doesn't have to do anything. You get a treat in their mouth within 2 seconds. Walk a couple paces, say it again. Do that with about 10 treats, maybe 6 times over the course of 2 days, and then you don't have to do that anymore. Now when you say yes, the dog should be like, who's going to hook me up with a treat? So we talked about petting with a purpose. We also talked about passive training, or what a lot of trainers call capturing. Petting with a purpose is what it sounds like. It's petting your dog for a reason. Kevin comes up and he likes to jump up or nudge people for attention, and then they pet him, so it works for him. So what I want you to do from now on is when Kevin nudges you, you give him a counter word, tell him to sit. If he sits within that 2-second window of the first and only time you say the cue, then you would say yes and then pet him as much or as little as you want. If he does it 2 or 3 times in a row, he's probably saying I need some exercise, which we'll talk about in a sec. But if he doesn't do what you want within the first time you've sang it, lean back, watch some TV, read some emails, play a game, hang out with the baby, whatever it is. Show him that I have other things I could do. I made you number one, and if you can't do it, that's totally fine. There's no punishment, but you're not going to get any attention from me. I'm going to use my attention to go to the next thing, and you're the one who's missing out, Mr. Dog. Now, for dogs, good attention and bad attention is pretty much the same thing. And a lot of us don't recognize that. So when the dog misbehaves, it gets an immediate correction and it does things we don't want, or that we do want, we ignore it unless we asked for that act. And that's going to be capturing, which we'll talk about in a sec. But for petting with a purpose, when the dog nudges me now, I tell it to do something. If it does it within 2 seconds, I pet it. If it doesn't do it, it gets nothing. After a while, the dog will start coming and sitting in front of you to prepay and ask for that attention. Make sure it asks it for a sit or lay down. If it's already sitting here, tell it to sit here or here. It has to do something to change its state. And when he does start sitting down to prepay for that attention, make sure you recognize and reward him, and try to pet him again in that oval section. Try to avoid reaching over his head. Now, after a while, he'll get in a habit of doing it, and you'll get in a habit of doing it. But to help you, the humans, get in a habit of doing it, I'd like you to use the watchword of paycheck. So if I'm sitting here and Kevin came up to me, or let's say I'm sitting here petting Kevin, and somebody comes in the room and they say paycheck to me because Kevin's standing, they might assume that I forgot to pet him with a purpose. So even if I did it right, I would stop petting him. I'd say, Kevin, sit. He sits. I would say yes and pet him on his chin. Then I'd turn to the person and say, hey, actually, when you open the door, he stood up, and I continued petting him. But thank you. I do forget to pet without a purpose. So it's a gentle reminder. It's not a gotcha. So don't ever argue. It just gives you an opportunity to practice again. That'll increase his confidence, his respect for you as a leader. It helps him practice basic obedience and makes your pets more valuable. And so use that watchword paycheck pretty liberally for the next couple months until you get in the habit of doing it. The second one is that I talked about is capturing what I used to call passive training. So let's say that Kevin is over in the kitchen and I see him walking my way. Well, as soon as he gets to me, I would just say yes and pet him because he came to me, and that is an action that I do like. Now, I'm not assigning a command word or a cue unless I know he already has it. But let's say he doesn't know that. You want to teach the dog to come. Every time he comes to me, I say yes and pet him. He comes to me from over here, yes, and I pet him. Within 2 seconds of him arriving at me, I pet him. Every time he sits, I say yes and pet him. Every time he lays down, I say yes and pet him. So what we're doing for them with the marker word is identifying the action or the behavior that we want and letting the dog know consistently that we're going to consistently reward or recognize that. And after a while, the dog will start offering that behavior to get our attention. Now, when I am 90% certain or greater that I can get the dog to do whatever it is, that's when I can start assigning the command cue. So if I was going to lure Kevin into a sit, and I was pretty confident I could lure him into a sit, I'd have him come over and lure him into a sit. And I would say, sit, lure him, and then say yes and pop the treat in his mouth. Now, eventually, I would drop the marker word and just say sit, he sits, and then I give him the treat. But there's nothing wrong with saying sit, luring him into a sit, and saying yes and giving him the treat. But eventually, when you do transition, it should be the cue command word is followed by the action from the dog, which is followed by a reward or reinforcement from the human. So that creates a contract. So the dog's like, if I sit, you're going to hook me up. I'm happy to sit. So for capturing, I'd like you to pay attention when Kevin sits, lays down, goes to his dog bed, name all your individual toys. Just say yes at first. So sit, come, lay down, go to the dog bed. When he drinks his water, say yes. When he takes his bite of his food, say yes. And eventually, when you put the food down, you know he's going to eat his food, maybe you say, pork chop, and then he comes over and eats his food. Eventually, pork chop can be your command cue to eat the food. So use the marker word as much as you need to at first until the dog understands kind of what it is that they do to get your attention. Then you can start saying the cue before you lure them into it or before they do the action on their own. What we're doing is essentially celebrating the things the dog does that we like, and that's the watchword that I like to use. So if Kevin walked up to me and I wasn't paying attention because I'm doing this video and somebody says celebrate, I say yes, and I start petting him. So remember, you only have 2 seconds to correct or reward a dog. So if somebody saw it happen and I didn't see it, and then they say yes, that's 2 seconds already. So I just gotta say yes and start petting him. Don't worry about reaching for a treat. For capturing or celebrating, I usually just give a tactile attention. You can give him a treat if you want, but you don't necessarily need to. Now, the Guardians right now free feed Kevin, and that kind of throws away something that's really important. Dogs eating is a very, very important activity. I'd recommend that they get a snuffle mat. Make sure you get one that's really thick. Don't get the one that's really sparse or really big tassels. You want it almost like shag carpeting. Message me if you can't remember which one. I'd also like to get an Omega Paw Tricky Treat Ball. Probably get the medium one for him. And then I'd like you to get a couple of treat or food dispensing toys or puzzles. And I'd like him to start getting fed twice a day. Now, at first, I would just put it in the bowl. So you put the bowl down and invite him over, and he's got about a minute or so to come over. If he comes over and sniffs the bowl and says, I'll eat later, and walks away, as soon as he walks away, pick up the bowl, dump it empty, but it's important to put that empty bowl back down. He'll come and lick the empty bowl. Well, what's up? Well, when you walked away, the kitchen closed. So you're going to eat when we ask you to eat, and if you don't want to eat, that's totally fine. You're an adult. You can do what you want to do, but the kitchen is not open 24 hours. Eventually, when you tell him, when you pull out the food, it becomes a special important time. And then you're the provider of the food, which can actually be beneficial. Now, make sure that we're not having the child should definitely not be around Kevin when he's eating. The humans can if they want, as long as he's not guarding it. But children, definitely not. Some people go and pet the dog when it's eating. You shouldn't do that. When they're eating, give them space. Also, I would like the humans to stop giving the dog human food. If you really want to do it, chop it up and put it in their food bowl, but never do it directly from the table. Especially because you have a little kid running around. He's going to have a hot dog, and all we need, the kid's just going to be holding the hot dog right here. Kevin's right there. Kevin's going to snatch that hot dog. And so we need to teach Kevin, and dogs should know it's inappropriate to be within 7 feet of anybody who's eating. And this would be a great opportunity to practice that away cue. So if you just put little Jay right here, and then have mom sitting right behind him, and then as soon as Kevin approaches, say, away, throw a treat that way. Kevin goes there, Kevin goes back, away, throw the treat this way. So we're helping Kevin practice moving away and be rewarded for doing so he wants to do it. And eventually, if you're sitting way over there, you come in and you see the baby sitting here on the floor eating something and Kevin's getting close, you say away and he runs away, then you would pet and reward him after the act. Let me see. Get a snuffle mat, and those treat dispensing toys, and feed once a day with the snuffle mat and once a day with one of the 2 or 3 other treat dispensing toys that you have. And you could actually put the Omega Paw treat ball in the long-term confinement area, the fenced-in areas. That's what we call a long-term confinement area. Put it in there. That way he nudges it around, and the baby can't get to him, and he can't nudge it underneath the couch or something like that. Also for the little box with the little pattern, the maze to begin to keep Jay out of it. Every once in a while, you get like a dumbbell or something, get a bully stick, drill a hole through the back of this bully stick, take a zip tie and zip it to the dumbbell. So the only place that Kevin can eat that is in the little protective safe zone. And so that's a nice way to give him incentive to want to hang out there as well. Now, Kevin, I think, is also under-exercised and under-stimulated. Dogs need mental exercise and physical exercise and mental stimulation every couple of hours. And if they don't, that often will impact their behavior in not the best ways. So I'd like to see the guardians using the games of fetch, perhaps that doggy stairmaster we talked about, and then tug toy. Those are great physical, and then sniff walks are great ways to burn energy in a physical exercise capacity. We'd also like to use Cookie in the Corner. You can message me if you can't find it. I can send you a video on that. But you just Google scent games and look for all sorts of ways to hide treats around the house. Then Kevin's got to use his nose to find them. Like I said, sniffing on a walk is a great way to burn energy. Training him is also a great way to burn energy and to increase and deepen the bond between the humans. So each week, I'd like the guardians to pick an easy exercise. The first one should be just luring him around. I call it hurricane. So if Kevin's right here, touch him with the nose. Kevin! Kevin! There we go. Let's show how to do the hurricane. What a good trot. Yes. So just hold it. Make sure you're holding it nose level and just kind of lure him. Oh, come here, buddy. Lure him around in a circle. Come here. You were doing this so well earlier. There we go. Well, maybe it's because I stepped on your toe. But the idea is you lure him all the way around, and when he completes the circle, say yes, and then release that treat in his mouth. Some dogs prefer going to the right. Some dogs prefer going to the left. Just find whichever one he wants to do. You want to try that a couple more times while we talk about it. Maybe the next, and then, so one of the guardians should take the lead, teach him how to do whatever this cue is. Come here, buddy. There you go. And we'll shape you into that. There you go. And so shaping means that you're breaking the activity down into small steps and helping the dog practice and rewarding each partial part of it. Come here, buddy. So I get him to take a step to the side. There we go. So I might reward him here, 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 here. He was doing it earlier. I think he's a little bit tired from what we were doing. But maybe just teach him. Eventually you just say hurricane and he does a circle. Oh, there we go. We're almost there. Oh, we're almost there. There are how about attention? That's another one that I teach. And I have videos for some of these basic lessons if you want. And Clark can also show you some basic commands. But what I like the guardians to do is take turns. 1 week, guardian A teaches the lesson. And once the dog kind of knows it, explains what the cue and all the steps are to the next guardian. And then you practice that before you let him outside, before you let him on the couch or whatever it is. All week long, you're practicing circle, 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 circle. At the end of the week, you say circle, and he just does a circle. Next week, maybe you play Bang You're Dead or Roll Over or Sit Pretty or a play bow or whatever it is. And so each week we're going to trade off for about 2 or 3 months. At the end of 3 months, that's like 12 or more new cues. Those are great ways to distract and redirect the dog's attention. It's also going to boost the dog's self-esteem and confidence, and it's going to deepen the relationship between the dog and the human. And training, like I said, is a great way to drain energy if they're using their brain. I'd like to see you training in like 2 or 3 minute training sessions, maybe 3 or 4 times a day minimum. More would be better. And make sure you practice all over the house, inside the house, upstairs, downstairs, all over the place, so the dog has a lot of variety. Let me see. We also talked about rules and structure. One of the rules should be that Kevin shouldn't be allowed within 7 feet of the children, of Jay when he's eating, and shouldn't be allowed in the kitchen when we're preparing food. So if he comes in the kitchen, we're going to throw the treat to the dog bed. Comes back in the kitchen, throw the treat in the dog bed. If he, same thing with, shouldn't be allowed on the furniture without an invitation, and he should have to sit or do something to earn it. So if he jumps up the couch, just pull out a treat, throw it against your backboard over there by the TV, and it goes on the dog bed, and he runs over the dog bed and gets it. And so if I jump up here, the treats go over there. After enough repetition, he'll just go over there. And when he does, then throw a treat over there. So now when I go over here, it rains treats. Why wouldn't I just hang out over here? And then if you want to get him on the couch, that's great. But right now, Jay is up on the couch, and the Guardians want a little bit of some boundaries. And also, height can matter for dogs. And so if the dog is on the furniture and Jay comes over and wants to get on the furniture, that can be a conflict. So it might be a good idea to try to keep Jay, Kevin mostly on the floor. And then again, just rewarding the heck out of that dog bed will go a long ways towards doing that. Now we're gonna have Claire come back and work on the relaxation protocol, and that's gonna be, I think, a wonderful exercise for the problems that we're having here. Now the last thing is the engage-disengage game that we had above. I would love to have the Guardians also work on that with the visitors that come over. Now I talked about in that video going to a park or something like that, working with dogs, but you can do that with guests. So for your neighbors, people he barks at. So you just go sit in your yard and the neighbor walks by, he looks, yes, and then gets a treat. Yes, he gets a treat, yes. After a while, you get closer and closer. So you do that with skateboards or people or dogs or anything your dog's reactive to. That's why it's a great exercise. I also like you to practice that focus exercise. Now remember, you're gonna keep on doing about 12 treats. Put your treats here. Make sure your hands look uniform. So a bunch of treats here, hold it here. And then as soon as when you go like this, he's looking up at you. Now you're ready to add the cue. So we go like this. Focus, dog looks up, then go 1 second, and work your way up to that 15-second and going straight from your nose to the dog's mouth. So you want to practice that within a week, in the house, multiple times a day, different parts of the house. And when you get to the point where you can say for 15 seconds, you're going like this, and the dog's staying there passive, is now trying to come and get it. Then go in your backyard and practice it. Let him sniff and do his stuff first. And then go back to 1 second for 3 or 4 treats, and 1 second, 2 seconds for 3 or 4 treats. 1 second, 1, 2, 3 seconds. So the one from your knee to your nose is always 1 second, and eventually you work your way up to 15 seconds outside, and this should be accomplished within about 2 days. Then when we're on walks, we have now assigned a marker, a cue. So now when we're on walks, there's nobody around, just say, Kevin, or I wouldn't even say Kevin, I would just say, focus, he looks up at you, boom, and drop that treat to him. And work your way up where you say, focus, he looks up at you, and you're taking 15 seconds to get that treat to him. Now we've established a way to redirect the dog's attention. Now, if he is barking or reacting to something, the best thing you do is increase distance. Take a left, walk down somebody's driveway, walk around somebody's car or a shrub, and then ask him to do some focus or some hurricanes or whatever the commands are. Get him distracted thinking about something else. And don't be afraid to do the rapid fire trading inside. So if once you get out the door, he's not listening, you just start inside. Sit, yes, treat. Take a step towards the door, sit, yes, treat. Take another step towards the door. So by the time you get out the door, he's already had like 7 or 8 treats. He's like just paying attention to you because he's getting all those treats for doing it. Also make sure you get yourself a 6-foot straight leash. Try not to use that retractable leash. The further away he gets from you, the less he's going to pay attention to you. Also on walks, pay attention and reward check-ins. After a while, he'll just be like walking along, yes, and then offer him that treat. So you're not telling him to do it, but you're saying, when you look at me, that's a rewardable action. The more he does that, the more he's likely to continue doing that. Kevin, I just wanted you to come. I didn't necessarily need you to bark. Now, if he's barking, just ignore him. You can have the person increase the distance a little bit, but remember, good attention, bad attention is pretty much the same thing. See his back leg right there? See that lean? So if he gives you that body language, he's telling you, I'm uncomfortable with that person. And so if you ever see that, then that person should just hold out. When Kevin comes up to him, yes, give him the treat, but try not to pet, just give the treat only. Don't try to reach and pet. And also remember to tell your guests to watch for consent. So if I reach like this, and see I moved away, so he's saying, I don't want you to pet me. So what I do when I reach to pet a dog, I go like this. See, he leaned in, and then I start offering my hand and I can start petting, but at any point he starts to move away, I stop. The more that happens, the more he's like, David is listening to me. David is trustworthy. Sit. Yes. And then I like to do this one, I call this attention, but I like to do this before feeding time. Yes. Whoops. And if he wants to move, oh, one other thing I forgot. Sit. Yes. So all I want to do is just on his haunches, not dancing, just up, some people call it beg or sitting pretty. Now, last little thing, I'd like you to teach him to catch. So if you watch, I go like this. He just watches and he doesn't get it. So what I would do is I would probably actually use the Charlie Bears, which are actually across the room. But basically what you want to do, I'll get a big piece here, is they would go like this. And if he catches it, you would say yes. If he doesn't catch it, somebody should be sitting on the floor and they grab that treat and give it back to the person who throws. So the idea for this is eventually you can create a game. So then when you have visitors come over that he's not sure about, they can play catch by throwing the treat to him. He gets to stay as far away from them as he wants. And eventually you get closer and closer because they're delivering treats, but he doesn't have to engage with them. He can do it from a distance. And so it's a wonderful way to start building confidence or a positive association with people that he doesn't know. Also, go to the green spot, get yourself, like I said, ask for a sample of different dog foods. They'll give you about 10 or 20, 15 bags of different stuff. And then put the label down, write down on it, how interest 1 to 5, come up with your own scale. And then figure out which brand of or food or flavor protein he likes. And then you can get a brand. Make sure you rotate different flavors each month. Let me see, what else? Is there anything else? Sit. Kneecaps, tracheas. See, we were practicing that just like 4 or 5 times. You saw he already went to that up. Attention. And I like to do this with their kibble. So I do grab like 10 pieces of kibble. I do 20 piece kibble right before meal time. Whoops. Sit. Come here. Sit. Attention. Attention. Whoops. Attention. Yes. That was a little bit high. That's okay. Sit. Attention. That's a little bit high again. So don't hold it up too high. If that's the case, if he's jumping, you might be holding it too high. Attention. There you go. Attention. So you can do this like about 20 treats, pieces of kibble. And after a while, the way I do it for my dogs is I go like this. I go, attention. And my dog does that. So now I go, attention. My dog just raise up. And people, when we meet people out and about, they're like, oh, your dog is so cute. All right, Kevin, let's let everybody see how handsome you are. Come here one more time. Sit. This is Kevin, and this is Kevin's roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.